Fuzz Bat Gigs.
Pavarotti, take one.
Cast off, me and these ropes, I'm one knot, tangled in a heap. I know it's paradox with my dreams. I know it's paradox with my dreams.
Okay, so you've just heard there Mutiny in Jonestown by the Minutemen and Nine Sisters by Burnt Paw. And we're now going to go to an interview that I conducted with the lovely Mr. Burnt Paw.
Yeah, so Fuzz Bat Gigs podcast number 1. See how this goes. So with me on the podcast is Mr. Burnt Paw, aka otherwise known as Andrew Green or Andy Green.
Hello.
Right. So explain to anyone who doesn't know. So what is Burnt Paw? Like, what does Burnt Paw do? What does Burnt Paw represent, etc.
Oh,
like a general overview. Like, like explain that someone's like, oh, who is Burnt Paw?
Well, who is Burnt Paw? What does Burnt Paw represent? That's quite a heavy question to land on me.
Just a general thing, like describe to anyone who might be listening to this. What's Burnt Paw like? What does Burnt Paw do?
For sure. Well, I mean, primarily, I'm a fingerstyle guitarist and songwriter, based now in Edinburgh, although I've performed in lots of different places as well. And I guess kind of like, I see the type of music that I write and perform as being sort of on the outer orbits of the kind of alternative folk world. So sometimes it's kind of passing through psychedelic folk, sometimes it's kind of passing through kind of darker folk regions, sometimes very much within the kind of pagan folk style. So I guess there's a kind of a mixture of accessible kind of melodic and lyric style mixed in with experimental weirdness. How does that sound?
That's actually basically pretty nailed it. Like, I was listening to that there, and I'm like, man, that's like just like painting the perfect picture of you in my head, because that's, I would totally say it's very story driven folk with like with these sort of fringes into like outer worldly wizardry weirdness, like, because you're a wizard. So
well, it's glad that at least one person in this world thinks that. It's no, I think that like. Often when you're like on the inside of your own creations, it's always very hard to describe what you think that is to other people. To me, kind of Burnt Paw is a practice, more than like a particular style. It's a way of approaching stories and imagination and kind of music writing. And often when you're creating stuff, you don't always know exactly what it is that you are creating. That's the beauty and the fun and the magic of it, That's a beautiful way to describe it. So, have you got some tough questions for me?
Not really. I mean, they said that one was tough. I didn't think that one was going to be that tough, but it happens. So that's what Burnt Paw is. So how did Burnt Paw come to be? Like, I know you have roots in playing like noisier and heavier stuff and stuff in the past. So what made you decide to go and do, or what made the songs take you? What inspired Burnt Paw to be, basically? I think that's how to phrase it.
That's kind of easy to answer. Chaos, disaster, collapse. It was basically, I've been performing music for a long time. I'm not going to reveal how old I am, because obviously as a wizard I'm 400 years old, but I've been performing music in this earthly incarnation for quite a long time. And originally, I was kind of part of the music scene in Birmingham, where I was playing a lot of really heavier stuff. And I was a lead guitarist in kind of post-rock bands and stoner bands and all kinds of stuff that was just really great fun. But as you know, like within keeping a band going and surviving in the band world for a long period of time is really, really difficult. And at some point, some kind of chaos and, kind of shift is going to happen if you want to carry on being a musician. And I guess for me, a shift happened, I don't know, maybe it was sort of 6 or 7 years ago, where within the space of 6 months, I kind of like the band that I was in collapsed. And then the job that I've been doing for 10 years was kind of cut by council savings in the Midlands, and all kinds of things were happening that made me really sort of question whether I was going to be able to carry on being involved in music. But I really felt a very powerful, strong sort of feeling and intuition that I kind of wasn't done yet. You know, there was more that I wanted to do.
Mystic.
There was more. I didn't know what it was, you know, but I knew that there was a lot more that I was capable of, really. And so, you know, it kind of took then a good number of years to go away and like begin again as a musician, to kind of go all the way back to the start and question my most fundamental assumptions. So it's like, what can you do without a band? What can you do when you suddenly find that you're living in America and, you know, you've only got an acoustic guitar and you have no idea of how to even play an acoustic guitar? Situation.
I can't imagine you not being able to play the acoustic guitar, man. Like,
I couldn't play acoustic guitar at all. You know, I couldn't play fingerstyle guitar. All the things that are completely natural to me now, I started from complete scratch. You know, I just kind of put the guitar in a really random open tuning and just was like living with my partner in an apartment in Memphis, and I just sort of spent a year sat playing like little patterns on the guitar, trying to figure out what it was, and slowly kind of started having my first glimpses of what it might mean to kind of write songs in those forms.
Is that how everyone gets into folk? They just stick it in some open tuning and sees what happens. They play in a band and they get a bit older, and then they just stick it into some tuning and they see what happens.
Pretty much
open tuning.
Pretty much exactly.
They're like, oh, I'm a folk musician now.
Pretty much exactly that. You've just defined the number of folk musicians and alternative folk musicians I know who've described exactly that. They are many and they are legendary, but I will reveal no names. Yeah. But that's exactly how it happens. You know, basically it's like you've been in bands for 20 years. You realize you can't hold that life down anymore. You've got to do something different, you know. So that kind of happened for me. But, you know, having said that, what was really interesting was that once I kind of started on the path of fingerstyle guitar and starting to write songs, it's like it grabbed me in a way that was like really powerful. And it's like I quite quickly started to feel something channeling through this new process that had never been there before. Because I think if I had just kind of picked up acoustic guitar and started messing around with it, and, you know, it wouldn't have stuck for very long if it wasn't the right thing to do. But I'd found a new tool. I'd found this kind of new opening by kind of questioning my assumptions of what it meant to be a musician and kind of going back to that starting point. But actually it opened out onto like this really rich landscape of kind of possibilities. So yeah, you know, it was Burnt Paw was born of, you know, out of many past lives, forming a new life.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad that came to you, because, you know, like, you know, this because then we have the lovely music and it's all.
Oh, thank you.
And Burnt Paw brought you to Edinburgh and to lots of wonderful people here, and, you know, and I'm delighted to have met you through that. So, you know, it's
likewise, Stuart.
And so it's all very lovely. But that's that's so mystical. It's amazing. Like I love it. Like I love this mystical path. It's like, oh, I was destined to do it. And it's like, but it's so daunting trying to be like because it's obviously that's the whole thing. I think it's not how long you've been in bands for to go from that to suddenly being on your own. There's much more exposure. You feel, I don't know, I find with doing the solo stuff, you feel so much more, you know, because I'm very much still cutting my teeth with that, and you feel so much more exposed. And you're like, what is this? And then it just evolves, and as everything does, as every kind of musical project people do, they evolve and grow as time and stuff goes on, and you kind of figure out more. But the first time you play without people, I find is like, what's going on, like.
It's very scary. It's very scary when you first start playing. You know, for me, it meant kind of like going all the way back and starting at open mic nights. And, you know, I just sucked for ages. I was just really, really bad. You know, I could barely sing and kind of play the patterns. And, you know, it's like when you've got nerves and you're trying to play fingerstyle guitar and all those things, it's really difficult. And if you're used to when you're playing in a band, it's like you and your army of brothers and sisters on stage. You have that energy and you kind of have that force when it's going well. But when you're a solo musician, everyone's looking at you, and you have to find out pretty quickly whether you like that or not. And I think for myself, I spent years feeling terrified and vulnerable and kind of freaking out, like whenever I go and play stuff solo. But underneath it, I just felt like it was meant to happen. I just felt like every time I went and like came away thinking, oh my God, I've just embarrassed myself. I get up the next day and I'd want to do it again. It's
all about learning and developing as that's life in general. For you learn from your mistakes and you try and it's just you got to try and set the soul. You got to try and set yourself up, I guess. Because when you're in a band, if you're in all providing each other's good form, you can all sync each other up together, and it can be like a great unit. And if one of you fucks up the other one or makes a mistake, the other one can someone else can you're together. Whereas on your own, if you screw up and you're just that open to people, then like it's only you that's there to kind of try and channel that back and stuff. And that's
but the good thing about that is like in this world of kind of like glistening sort of performance, public persona, kind of like having to be good at everything. There's a great beauty in allowing yourself just to be kind of messy and to be figuring things out. Most of the creative process is kind of not knowing what you're doing and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to not be sure, and to go and not only do that when you're working on things at home, but actually to go and do that in front of other people, to know that it's going to probably not go right, to know that it's going to take time. And I think if you don't allow yourself that as a musician, then you're going to be in a really difficult creative struggle, because you're not allowing yourself to experience the kind of different ranges of disaster and triumph that you're kind of supposed to have as a musician as you're developing. I also remember I played a gig supporting this really wonderful musician called I think it was the Dad Horse Experience. This was back in Nottingham. It was,
I don't know what that is, but I love the name. I love it.
It was really wonderful music. I won't try and describe it. You'll have to go and listen. Basically, he kind of tours solo all over the place, or he was doing at this point. And he said, if you want to be a solo musician, you've got to be a good band member and friend to yourself. And I was
that's amazing.
Yeah. And at the time, I was like, this man sounds as though he speaks wisdom. But in the years since then, I've realised just how true that is. It's like you have to allow yourself as a solo musician to have like triumphs and disasters, and you have to pick yourself up and just not only allow yourself to have those range of moments, but to thrive and enjoy them. That part of the human experience. It's like it's a wonderful thing, like when you go home one night and you're like, man, I played a gig and I totally sucked. Yes.
But you got out there and you did it, and that's the main thing. Like, and you reacted to people, you bared your soul, people and and folk reacted, and you had like, and that's the whole thing about gigs in general. You have like a shared experience of yourself, and it was there, and you interacted and everything. That's what's part of the magic. That's something I miss so much at the moment. Exactly. So, well, we'll touch on that later. I'm getting ahead of myself with the with current chat. Okay, so. Moving slightly back in that there, so you were talking about playing open mic nights, that's what you did to begin with and stuff, but then eventually you wanted to record some of your songs and stuff. Now, the first release that I found on your Bandcamp was Sparrow's Scrapbook. Was that the first thing you recorded, or did you record some other, experiment with other recording things, or was that the first one? Because it said that was released in April 16.
Well, that was like really, really, really early on. In terms of like, I think that was probably one of the first recordings that I did make. And in fact, when I did it, I'm not even sure if I had the name Burnt Paw like connected with it then. I think I just went off to some small studio in the hills somewhere and like just was like, I want to go and see if I can actually sing and record a demo, but I'd already got the kind of this really important elements, or what were going to become the most important elements for me, which was like playing fingerstyle guitar in a way that suggested a landscape, and then creating stories that moved through the landscape that was produced by those guitar melodies. So it was very important. I think there's kind of stuff on that early recording that I really love, but it was perhaps slightly more connected with the kind of American primitive and kind of folk styles of playing guitar than perhaps my later stuff has developed. But yeah, that was the first recording, the first proper recording.
So it was that, and then the next one I could see was "I Will Always Be a Wanderer," which was like more instrumentally. So that was according to Bandcamp. I'll use my little sheet that I have there just to make people clear that I'm not cheating. I have a good memory, but I am referring to some stuff to help me here. That was September 2017. It said for that one.
Right.
It's nice visiting those because I was quite familiar with your first year with the Stone Apples one, which I'll talk about. I was familiar with that, and then your two albums and stuff. I wasn't really that familiar with the two demos before that, so it's kind of nice to kind of have like a listen to those because for me it's like, oh, this is like earlier Burnt Paw and getting stuff. But so what was with that one? Was that one recorded in a studio as well, or was that at home? That one I was Be Your Wanderer, or was that
the instrumental one was, I think, recorded like on my own gear. Yeah, that was a home recorded demo. And I think, in those kinds of early stages, I was still kind of having that inner debate of like, I really love listening to instrumental fingerstyle guitar music. It's a real kind of passion for me. I've lots of friends who are really, really wonderful kind of practitioners and pioneers of instrumental guitar. And, there was part of me that was like, shall I just do that? Shall I kind of just write instrumental music on the guitar? Because, it doesn't lack anything. It's just like, it's a beautiful, beautiful art form, very spiritual, wonderful kind of thing to do. So I was moving a little bit between writing EPs that were instrumental and writing EPs that were song-based. I think basically to kind of see which way the tides would take me, But yeah, that was that I Will Always Be a Wanderer was a home recorded one, and I felt very much like it was about the moment when I was in a transition between landscapes, between like the Midlands and the States, and moving to Scotland as well. So
yes, because had you moved to Edinburgh by that point? I think
I think it might have been something that I'd literally just arrived in Scotland, and I think that the way of writing those instrumental pieces was an attempt to kind of like come to terms with the massive journey that I'd just been on, this kind of transatlantic living shift, that had happened. So yeah,
that's great. Right, I think what we'll do now is we'll move to the musical section in the podcast now. So we'll play some songs.
Set fire to himself in his sleep. Kevin has finished his shift for another week. Rolled over Beethoven, scratched out on Simon's free string guitar. And the heart is a tower without walls. Sit drinking at 10 a.m. They ask if I know any girls, and if so, could I please direct them. There is a woman who is known on this street, flower blue eyes, tea cozy assassin hat. Her heart is a tower with no key. And a worker fell from the scaffolding today, leaving behind another empty space. I asked the cameraman, did you know his name? He said, I'm just here to film another empty space. Well, did you know you need a license for that? We saw you out in Cotton Town last week. You're not the best we've heard, but you play pretty good. Did you know your heart is a tower of blood? And here is a child who can speak directly to God. But it takes another drink to be sure, and ask me for a hug. Bernadette's husband died on that very spot. Oh, Danny, I will remember what you can't forget. With your hands all bloody and broken, you said our death is just a tower with no words.
Used to be one of the rotten ones, and I liked you for that. Used to be one of the rotten ones, and I liked you for that. Used to be one of the rotten ones, and I liked you for that. Now you're all gone, got your makeup on, and you're not coming back. Can't you come back? Used to be one of the rotten ones, and I liked you for that. Used to be one of the rotten ones, and I liked you for that. Used to be one of the rotten ones, and I liked you for that. Now you're all gone, got your makeup on, and you're not coming back. Bleaching your teeth, smiling flash, talking trash under your breath. Bleaching your teeth, smiling flash, talking trash under your breath. Bleaching your teeth, smiling flash, talking trash under your breath. Bleaching your teeth, smiling flash, talking trash under my window.
Rolling from your bright sarcastic eye, a California teardrop of gold. Maybe you were cold, yeah, so was I. Holding back the year before the poison took its toll. Made your paper thin, nearing gold. Eventually I finally it caught up. I held you back, grabbed you by the arm. I played upon your fear, rolling down the window on time. Order up some breakfast if I can. Hold me back, hold me by the arm. Wipe away my tears, wipe away my tears. The story ends with friends and early nights. A kitten grown a cat and no more fights. This is how we stay together, love. Holding back the year. Hold me back, grab me by the arm, whisper in my ear. Holding back the year. Holding back the year.
Little one, can I tell you of before? A world that was wild and wide and more. I hold you up, my love, that I can show you this winter sky, alive with the fuzz and geese in flight. Call the geese that come home 3,000 miles in hot weather. Lapwing on spread in the sunlit bay. I will try to
blossom and snow. We rode through the town with not a care in the world. We plunged through the emerald stream in a world before the motorways came. And we would go to the orchard deep and fill our baskets with stolen apples. Horsey, horsey, I won't forget you.
You've just heard there, we've had Towers by Burnt Paw, Anthems for a 17-Year-Old Girl by Broken Social Scene, Follow Your Bliss by Burnt Paw, Holding Back the Year by Lou Barlow, Wild Geese by Gaze's Ghost, and Horsey Horsey by Burnt Paw. So that last song there brings me to the next point in the Burnt Paw discography discussion, which was Stolen Apples, Lost Crowns, and that says it was, I can't remember what handwriting, was that January 2018 or something? When we met, like properly and stuff, you had that out, because I remember the first time I put you on in December 18, that was the only release that was the physical release that you had. I remember that, and I think I still have that. Yeah, I've still got that shell that you gave me that time as well. That's on the back. That's on my windowsill next to my daffodils and my peace lily.
Yeah.
So that EP was also a home one. You were definitely in Edinburgh when that one was together.
It was.
Sure. So
that EP in a way was I think the piece of the set of songs that kind of introduced me really to the alternative music community in Edinburgh and Glasgow to a smaller extent. And yeah, I mean, it was a strange experience really, because like I'd been kind of writing and practicing, and I was kind of starting to feel my feet a little bit more in Edinburgh, and I kind of sensed that I had some kind of songs in me. And actually, like one evening, I just kind of like locked myself away in my room, and I pretty much wrote and recorded all of the songs in one session, which, you know, is very, very rare that it kind of happens that way. Normally you'll kind of work on materials over, you know, much longer periods of time in some cases. But I kind of wrote this batch of songs in this session, and I was like, oh, you know, I kind of got a feeling about these songs. They kind of seem to sit together really well, and the kind of lyrics and the imagery seems to sit together well. And I was like, you know, actually, if I was gonna release an EP, maybe I should do something like this. And then I was like, actually, why don't I just use these songs? You know, it's like I hadn't really, it hadn't kind of connected with me that like I'd done something that was releasable when I first kind of recorded all of them. I was just like, they were just a bunch of songs that I was really happy with. And then I kind of realized, I think the next day I kind of went back and listened to them, and I was like, no, you know what? Actually, I'm going to really trust my instincts, and whether no one listens to them or likes them or whatever, I'm gonna use these as like my set of songs that I go out and start kind of playing. It was such an important kind of lesson again in trusting your instinct as a songwriter, because within a fairly short space of time, actually, I got some like really great responses to it, considering it's a home recorded EP, even to the point where I need to do a call out here to the wonderful Voxbox Music, because Darren, who owns Voxbox Music, you know, kind of also ended up taking on that EP and was responsible for releasing it on the Voxbox home label. So
was it come out on that? That's cool.
Yeah, it came. So I released it as a digital thing, but Voxbox Music released it on their kind of shop label as an EP, which then also meant that, you know, it was a really wonderful way of meeting other musicians and, you know, helping to connect with other kind of gigs and things like that. So Darren and Voxbox and other friends that were connected with the store, some really wonderful musicians and friends there, were really supportive of that EP, and it really helped to, you know, kind of get me to meet lovely people like yourself and, you know, the amazing musicians that are in Edinburgh. So yeah, it was an important EP for me.
Yeah, it was lovely to sort of, like, I remember because I'd seen you before I'd heard anything. Like, you know, I remember Sync the first time. I think it was maybe no Mike at Henry's, I believe. I think it would be. Yeah, it's like years. I remember we met before. I think I remember the Elvis Shakespeare release party. I know that's right, because you played there as well.
Yeah.
So I can't remember if the first time I saw you was there or if I'd seen you briefly at an open mic at Henry's. I think I might have seen you maybe play a song at Henry's maybe before. I can't remember. The first time I remember seeing you properly was definitely Elvis Shakespeare in on Leith. So while we're here, actually, let's give Elvis Shakespeare a shout out, because Elvis Shakespeare are a great shop. So when things are okay again, you should go to Elvis Shakespeare. They've got an online shop. People should go to that. Voxbox, I've not been into myself, but I've heard good things about theirs. So when things clear up, I really should go visit Voxbox. Like that's in Stockbridge Way, isn't it? So
yes.
So this is more for people who live in Edinburgh. If you live in Edinburgh or you're near, you know, go. But if you don't, then obviously, if you ever are in Edinburgh, when, you know, we get out of this plague in 2000 and never go. So that works out quite nicely as well, because I was meaning to ask earlier on, but I forgot to ask, was so the first sort of Burnt Paw performance was open mic nights and stuff in the States, you were saying, but you weren't sure if you had the name like then. But do you remember the first time you played with the Burnt Paw name? Was that before Edinburgh, or would that have been in Edinburgh itself?
I honestly don't know.
No, what is he doing? Just curious if you remember.
I can't remember at what point when I kind of started using it. It's almost like it kind of it settled upon me, and then it was like it had always been there, and it you know.
I get what you mean, because sometimes when you kind of think about like things you do for a period of time, you're like, oh, it becomes so much part of your identity and your character and who you are and stuff, and you're kind of like, oh, like it would feel weird to not be that. Like I find that with bands you've been in, or like, I don't know, when I started doing my own stuff, like, you know, I'm kind of like, have I not always been like Puppet Midnight in some capacity? And then like, yeah, so it's so all of the gigs that I've played in Edinburgh have been under the name of Burnt Paw, and, you know, there've been lots of different times where I've kind of considered just completely changing it and going with, you know, different names or different ways of presenting kind of what I do.
but sometimes something just feels like it has a life of its own. And I think kind of the poor aspect of what I do is it's a kind of a little creative cave place that I go to when I'm writing a certain type of music. And while I still feel the energy of that, then it'll still exist. I mean, I think sometimes when people say like, when was a certain project born? When was like Burnt Paw born? In a way, the answer to that should always be like today. Like the answer to like when any musical project is born should be like right now. Like if you wake up in that morning and it still feels alive and it still feels fresh, that's when it's born. It's born in the moment, time and time again.
Still feel like when you still feel like the passion for it, when you wake up and you're like, I'm going to do this today. That's like
in a way, Stuart, I think there is a kind of a spirit aspect towards making a conscious effort to engage with music in a particular way, but there's also a kind of a rational aspect to it, that really you've got this kind of one life, you've got this one set of creative energies that you're working through at this time and place, and you shouldn't do something that you don't really fully believe in. And I know that in itself is a bit of a cliched thing to say, but it's
so true though.
But it's kind of true, So I think every time that you're involved in a project, I've been in situations where you're going into band rehearsal meetings, or you're kind of trying to write a new set of material, and you can try and push it through, but if your heart isn't quite in it and you're not really believing it, then it's going to be really hard to make something that translates into other people's kind of hearts and imaginations, Whereas if you're always challenging yourself to feel like, is this alive? Is this thing that I'm doing alive? Is it alive now? Not just because I've made 2 albums, or not just because I've done this tour or that tour, or I've played with this person or that person. Forget all that. Is it alive now in you, in your spirit, in your hands, in your guitar, in your bass?
In your heart as well. You got to feel it in your heart when you're creating. Exactly. You got to be behind it, because similar to yourself, I've had moments where like, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not into that project anymore, but sometimes you need to break from things, or sometimes you're doing a band where like sometimes you just need to kind of do other things. Sometimes you can't like. I think, and you're right, because it shows, and sometimes you can doubt yourself. You can think, all musicians will have the crisis of confidence, but sometimes when you're trying to do things, you're not fully behind, into, you can be like, can I even write stuff? And you could have get myself like, I can't write anymore. I have no creative juices. But then you just step back from where you find something that you go to something with your all, or that you're fully into, that your heart's, that your spirit's there, and then suddenly you're like, oh wait, I've got loads of ideas. What's going on? Like,
you have to keep asking yourself questions about what you're doing, and by that criteria, it suggests that your project is born at the start of every day, and it dies at the end of that day, and then it gets reborn again the next day. And what you do between.
I love this. It just makes me want to just go off and be really. I'm a relatively creative couple of days, but it just makes me want to go off and be extra creative now. It's like giving me lots of cool like ways of framing stuff, and this is what music is about. It's meant to be about creatives inspiring each other and having each other's back and everything and stuff. And that's one of the things I love about just the DIY friendly scene, particularly like the way Edinburgh's like where you've got to kind of look a bit harder than some cities, I think, for the magical, wonderful creatives. But when you find these people and you kind of work together and everyone kind of tries to do what they can, keeping things alive, it's just amazing. It's a really beautiful thing. And
let me put it this way, Stu. If you imagine an owl, right, and this
I love owls.
This owl it's sat in the top of this huge oak tree, right, and the moon's out, right, and the moon is like glittering down on these trees that are surrounding this owl, and this owl is looking out over the canopy of the trees and the woods. Do you reckon the owl is sat there thinking like, I've seen all these trees before, or do you reckon the owl is wrapped in its intrinsic owlness and seeing everything through its owl piercing eyes, as if it was seeing them like for the very first time, and all of the trees are lit up through the owl eyes under the moon, like they're blazing, like the trees are on fire, because the owl's vision is so intense. It's looking at every single leaf and it's seeing every possibility for the places that it wants to fly. Or is the owl sat in the top of the tree just thinking, you know what, maybe I'll order a pizza tonight?
Well, the owl probably thinks like, the former a lot of times, but occasionally the owls allow nights off where it can think like the latter, in order up, I was gonna say owl Dominoes, but I don't want to say that. I want to say owl brawl pizzas, because brawl pizzas are better than Dominoes. So let's stick with that. But I was probably thinking as well. I'm pretty magic, because owls can turn their head. Owls can turn their heads around their body, and that is always fascinated me. That's fucking amazing.
I guess.
Or flipping amazing. I'll have to edit that maybe.
I guess sometimes you've got to order a pizza. Sometimes you've got to look through your owl eyes.
Owls are so cool, man. We could also make a whole podcast talk about how amazing owls are. Like, I think owls are class. Like, I don't think owls are quite as like, I think like I could maybe go on longer if it was about bats, but owls are so cool, man. They really fascinate me. So we'll get to that way. Yeah, I'm sure that in the sense that they, I could have already guessed that they fascinate you as well, but it's interesting hearing like they're very 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 night mystic creatures, owls, actually. So like
messengers.
Indeed. So as I say, I'm trying to think what I'll do next. So where's the so do you remember what the first Edinburgh gig was? Was it like a Henry's open mic night, or did you play somewhere else before that? Or
I think it might have been. I think it might have been Henry's, and even if it wasn't Henry's, let's say that it was, because I like the idea that actually one of the places that's been really important to me has been Henry's Cellar Bar, just because it's been such a rich, weird melting pot of genius, freaky, beautiful strangeness, and the open mic nights there have always been incredible.
Good fun. They're good fun. It's a good place in Edinburgh for fostering lots of lovely creatives, and I do hope that they're alive for now, and I do hope they survive everything and stuff. But I can't interview you and not talk about Henry's, because it's very important to the Paw.
There's been many places that have been really important for kind of gigs in Edinburgh, but Henry's has definitely been very important. It's probably the place I played most, but that's probably true for nearly every alternative musician in Edinburgh. But yeah,
it's probably between that and the Depot. Currently, those are my two go-to venues. I just love going to stuff there. I love being there. There's so many cool things you see. You see people like yourself. You see people doing poetry at open mic nights. Like, there's a really good poet, Jay Summerland. If anyone likes poetry, he's awesome. You see, just lots of other things, and then there's like, for instance, like you got Joy and Struggle or Benny Henry's band to give them a. We looking like that's just examples of it. That's like it's what does Alistair build them as again? I'm pretty sure it's him that wrote that. It's ethereal gothic folk rock in just intonation or something. And I should maybe get him on the show actually sometime, talk about like that and Deaf White Males. Actually, I think that'd be a really good chat. Actually, I think last thing we'll talk about before going to the next batch of songs would be so the first Paw album was Lunar Vortex Incantations, and that, what my notes say, came out. It was March 2019. That one came out, and you went to a studio to do that one, didn't you? You went to Green Door in Glasgow? You went to record that one.
That was Green. It was recorded at Green Door in Glasgow in 2 days from start to finish, and it was mastered at Black Bay Studio, which is in the Hebrides, which is a really
I didn't know that.
Incredible place that I'd love to actually go and record an album there when I've got the money to make the journey to do it. But yeah, I mean that was a really creative and wonderful experience. And Green Door in Glasgow, they were
fantastic.
They're really wonderful. They're really wonderful for that kind of project. So I have a lot to thank them for, because that album was kind of picked up in quite a few places, and we got like some really great reviews in like Folk Radio UK and lots of different kind of online things and stuff. So it was by my standards, from not really expecting anyone to listen to my strange lunar ramblings and extended fingerstyle guitar stuff, it kind of did really, really well for me, because it allowed me to make friends, and it allowed me to kind of like share some of what I was doing with more people than I expected, really. So What more could you ask?
Well, first of all, Green Door's a very lovely place. Like I went there once myself with Moist, I remember, and like it's an amazing studio, and I love that they recorded to tape like there. Like it's a really small wee place. Like people like Ronan who recorded us is great, and was it Sam that recorded you? He owns the place, or was it someone else?
It wasn't. Sam wasn't there at the time.
He wasn't there then.
No. And
Who was it that recorded yourself at the time? Do you remember?
Ask me again in a second, because they were completely amazing and I've forgotten their first name. Move on swiftly. So
it's all right. It's all right. Amazing Green Door dude. We'll refer to them as. But no, it's a lovely place, and it's a great place to capture. And I would really like to do something there myself sometime. Like again, like with the band days. It's great for bands. It's great for that. It's like a cheap kind of. It's not that expensive a place either. You get really good sounds because like the album Lunar Vortex, the sound that's really good. Like it really captures you quite well, I would say. Yeah. And I'm not looking at anything else because obviously the other stuff you done before that was great, but that was the definite, like, you could definitely feel the progression in terms of like the quality, and like you were going on for these things that you were writing about, like things like Fire Maidens and like and what else? Was it? Is the Dragon one on that one, or is that like?
I think what was happening by then was that the kind of the real influence of the kind of Scottish landscape and my own interest in kind of more ancient histories and Neolithic histories and alternative like spiritual paths were really kind of starting to feel their way through into the kind of songwriting. So that album was important for that reason.
It's definitely more psychedelic, I think, and it definitely goes off in weirder. Well, it goes off in a lot of weird directions. Because other stuff is great, it's lovely, but if I say someone like, here's an album that really could have I'll introduce you quite nicely to Burnt Paw, what Burnt Paw is, just from a listener's perspective, I'm kind of like, that's the perfect starting point, I think, in a lot of ways, because it's very much like,
I'd agree.
It's easy to get into, and it's like, and I saw a comment, it was Jamie commented on it at the Bandcamp saying I think he was transported to like a campfire or something, or somewhere hearing them, and that's totally because it's very much just feel like these stories and everything, and it's really like, really easy to get lost in what's going on in that, like, and stuff, and it's just a lovely listen, and it's definitely like, if someone said, if I just show someone like, oh, you might like this, that's probably the one to start with, I think, and then you can also go into your other material, but that's probably the one, I think, because the next one is I'd say is a stranger album, but like I'm kind of thinking of this now. I was kind of just thinking, how would I get someone to Burnt Paw? And I'm like, no, that's the album I would direct them to, because I think overall, I think I prefer I Will Two Faces the follow up. I think, not knocking it, I think I do prefer the follow up, but I do think in terms of just like if someone was to hear and get an idea of Paul, I do think the Lunar Vortex one's the place to kind of.
I would agree.
Do it too. So if anyone listening to this hasn't heard Paul, start there maybe, and then like.
Thanks.
But yeah, I think that's probably a good point actually now to go to the next set of songs. We'll leave a wee space. So we okay. That sounds very like Emperor Palpatine.
Planks of wood held in highest esteem. Planks of wood build a nest for the apes. Planks of wood form channels in the water. Planks of wood keep in the people on their knees. Planks of wood tilt the heat to a fire. Planks of wood scrape the pork from your teeth. Planks of wood haul in the zombie at your window. Planks of wood containing lead brings forth graphenes. Planks of wood pulped and juiced becomes history. Planks of wood become your tomb, become your rest. Planks of wood converts grey matter into ashes. Planks of wood herald the footsteps of the Dutch. Planks of wood, would you believe it?
Terrible repression, terrible guilt, terrible violence, terrible tyranny. Nothing will come of it solid in the armour. We'll soften and we'll move it out of joint and muscle. Let the animals heal us with their presence, wet nose, beak, bright eye, attentive to the weather. All the fish aswim. The red kite, high activity, its precision dropping for the kill. This is metal on the vertical axis above the underwater worlds. When we sing, let us sing for them. Elevate us out of this dereliction, the blunt, the bland. Inertia locked in fat too long will unbind, will sing. Inhabit every landscape. Our hearts swell in the arms of the death rattle. lighting every landscape. In this, the unknowable. In this, the unknown. Big tankers come in, lit up in the mists, halo lights and a full crew eating their dinner, a low hum. These ancient folds of rock, black as pitch and blood red, witness the oil coming in from out of the sea. Madness pipes and pipelines, boreholes grinding at the seabed, seeping slicks into the currents, waiting for a spill. Big tankers come in, lit up in the mists, halo lights, and a full crew eating their dinner, a low hum. The big tankers come in, lit up in the mists, these ancient folds of rock, halo lights as pitch and full blood red, witness the oil coming in from out of the sea. The big tankers come in, lit up in the mists. Here, the lights, 1996, their dinner. The seabirds' wings glued together, beaks stuck together. Wash and wash and big tankers, all the soap in the world would take it out of the water. Halo lights and a full crew eating their dinner. The big tankers come in, lit up in the mists. Halo lights and a full crew eating their dinner. Big tankers come in, lit up in the mists. Halo lights. 1996, and the seabirds' wings glued to back, beaks stuck together, and a full crew eating their dinner. Big tankers come in, lit up in the wash and wash and wash. Halo lights, and all the soap in the world would take out, and the seabirds' wings glued to back, beaks. Halo lights, and a full crew eating their dinner. Big tankers come in, lit up in the wash.
I saw the blue deal
folks listening there, you'll have heard Fire Maidens by Burnt Paw, Planks of Wood by Con O'Donnell, Red Kite Saint Anne's Head by Clacker, and then Blue Deer Sky by Burnt Paw. So, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we were talking about the first album, and then so the next album that came out after Lunar Vortex and Couch was one I was saying that was my favourite Burnt Paw, which was Owl with Two Faces, which I would say it was a bit like, it's definitely a more experimental album for sure than the one before. So that was January 2020. So not long before the world went on fire and got a bit crazy. So I remember that because we played a very lovely gig together on my birthday last year, and I remember was the album. I don't think the album was out.
That was kind of the album launch gig.
Yeah, because I remember hearing the songs there, and then I remember listening to it later, and I was like, oh, I recognize these because they've left a real impression on me. That's probably one of my favorite Burnt Paw gigs because I remember that just being a really fun night to play, and it was a really fun night to just. And the poster was lovely. Like you did this very lovely poster, which I still treasure very much so, and it was very beautiful and lovely. And I remember went down. It was just a lot of fun. I remember I was a bit nervous. I think I was playing. I'm just playing some newer stuff, and then I remember I was quite happy with how my set went, and lots of nice people were there. The Sketchies, another shout out, Sketchy Beats Cafe, a very lovely, awesome venue, which I like as well. Like, and I remember that because I remember playing, and then I was like, well, I'm happy with that. And then I remember he played afterwards. It was just a really good set. Like I remember just like there was all sorts of different things going on. I remember you had some pedals on, and they were like creating like the noise stuff as well, and I remember you were getting really lost. You were almost like in a trance some moments. It was almost like you've been taken over by like the music, and you were like, it was just a really cool experience. I remember just like really enjoying that gig like a lot. So on that album, it was a new instrument. It was like a harp thing. You were
there was.
Some of the songs are that, and I remember like you've been delighted. Like, like, oh, I found this amazing instrument at the night of the gig.
I think I'll first of all, I'd also kind of back up what you said about Sketchy Beats Cafe. It's a really, really wonderful place and another very important place for me in Leith. So yeah, they do really, really wonderful stuff, and that was a particularly great night and a great venue to do that gig at. But yeah, I think on that the most recent album, The Owl with Two Faces, I really wanted to see if I could challenge myself to start to move beyond just playing kind of fingerstyle guitar. So I remember like I'd been kind of roaming around Edinburgh thinking about exactly what I could do to bring in something unknown into the music that would be a creative challenge for me and that would be sufficiently weird to take me in some new directions. And I stumbled across one of those, one of Edinburgh's many old, dusty, strange, antique stores. And hidden in the bottom corner of the room of this place, I found this like beaten up old, like kind of harp like instruments. And I kind of looked at it and started strumming across the strings on it. I guess in some places it's called like an auto harp, but it's kind of like it's a slightly broken version of an auto harp. And I remember taking it up to the counter, and the lovely guy that was working there was like, oh, this instrument, it isn't in tune, it hasn't been tuned properly, but do you still want it? He said, oh, would you like me to try and tune it for you? And I was like, no, keep it exactly as it is, and I'm going to write an album using it.
It is called to me. This instrument has chosen me.
The very, very last thing that I would have wanted to do in that circumstance is to have tuned this instrument properly. That was the last thing on my mind. What I wanted to do was to see if I could honour the instrument and whoever had previously owned it by using it in exactly the condition that I found it. So from that point on, I started kind of writing songs on it where I was improvising kind of like strange chant poems over the top of it and just kind of plucking the strings on it. And immediately it just sort of felt like it kind of wrote a few songs for me. So that, I think, contributed to the sense that album became more experimental because it was starting to show a mixture between extended fingerstyle guitar works, kind of image-based songwriting, and then songs that were using very different types of instruments for some of the music, which I think is now really where I'm kind of heading with what I'm doing. So
Yeah, well, because on the album there's plenty of like horror songs, like what's that one we sing about going to the trees and taking off your clothes and stuff. Like, there's bizarre ones like that. But then you've also got like obviously sort of really good folk tunes, like like Nine Sisters, which, finger style folky kind of song. So it's got like a really good sort of balanced album of as you're saying, of a lot of that stuff I'd say that you do, and then some of the weirder edges and stuff, because sometimes you can hear it in the songs. This album kind of, it does that in the songs too, but there's certainly moments where you just hear like a song on that, and it's like it's much more than that scape of things.
Yeah,
but it's good because it kind of like, it's very like, again, I think there's lots of reasons why which maybe are good to know as to why it's like, that's definitely my favorite Burnt Paw. I love the sound of it. It's well recorded as well. I think it was Terry at Anvil Studios that recorded it.
Yeah, I mean Terry did.
He did a really good job of capturing you. I thought it's because I after hearing it live first, then hearing that again, I was like, this is like hearing him.
Yeah,
it was really well done, I would say.
I think it's probably very important for me to give a big thanks to Terry, really, because you can imagine someone like me turning up with all these weird instruments and ideas of like these songs, and he's got this really beautiful studio in Raffo, and it's really incredible, like analog material and stuff, analog equipment. So I knew it would be a great place to kind of go and record. But you still have to have an understanding with the person that is recording you that like some weird dude with a broken auto harp is going to want to perform some improvised songs, and a couple of songs on that album I wrote actually while I was just in the studio. They just kind of happened when I was there. So there's a song called A Child Among the Horses, which I really also love playing. And I wrote that in the studio and recorded it in one take.
Oh, that's really cool to know. Like, it's quite nice that inspired you to then do that. Like, it's quite a nice way. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll come back to Terry later, because Terry plays an important part in your. Well, he's involved in the current part of the Burnt Paw of the Paw story. But before we go into that, I'm going to try to do a thing on these shows where basically have an act, basically recommend another DIY act will interview that who they really like and want to give a big shout out to and stuff. So you've chosen Kitchen Cynics for your choice there. So we're going to play a Kitchen Cynics and Grey Malkin song, and they're both. Right. I know Alan personally. I'd really heard of Grey Malkin before, but I did some reading about him today. Wonderful. And it turns out another really renowned folk musician. And I saw in a wee interview he'd done recently where he gave you a shout. Actually, I was like, oh, that's cool. This is going really full circle. I want to mention that before we talk about that. So we'll play a song that they've done a couple of collab albums together. It looks like. So we'll play a song from one of that later. But basically, can you give a brief overview of Alan and Kitchen Cynics and why you've chosen that as the one you particularly want to herald?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kitchen Cynics music for me is like a kind of a blueprint of all the types of stuff that I love the most. There's the psychedelic, there's the folklore, there's the mythic, there's the surrealist. He's kind of incapable of doing anything that isn't really interesting as a musician. And I love the idea that, he's influenced, I think, so many songwriters, but not just in one way, in lots of different ways, because I think in terms of the genres that he works through, he's got this kind of like evolving, kind of mutating style. And yet, even though you can listen to all these albums that are by Kitchen Cynics on Bandcamp, and there's a lot of them, and they're all
so many,
they're all
so many albums.
And yet, every time you listen to one, you still know it's Kitchen Cynics. So there's a kind of a wonderful power about that. And I think there's also what I love about the Kitchen Cynics work is there's a creative generosity there, and I think that's sort of shown by the way that. He's collaborated with so many different people over his career. And also he's been very, very supportive of lots of musicians. And I think sometimes in the music scene, it's very important to kind of have people around who just remind you that it's important to just be a good human being, and kind of support each other's creative endeavors. It's not a competition. And whenever I'm around, Kitchen Cynics playing music, or when I've met him and had a chat with him and stuff like that, I'm like, this is a great way of actually being a musician and being a person. So this is probably going to make him blush, but I have great respect for Kitchen Cynics, and I have lots of great creative inspiration, and people should really just go and explore the weird wonders of the things that he's created. And incidentally, just before I finish on that, you mentioned, I think this one of the songs that you played was a collaboration between Kitchen Sinks and Gray Malkin, and I feel similar about Gray as well. An incredible, adventurous, experimental, wonderful musician with loads of atmospheric beauty about what he does. So people should explore some of Gray Malkin's work as well.
Yeah, I need to give more of that, myself included, because I mean, I know Alan and Kitchen Sinks, and like, you know, I've heard a bunch of Kitchen Sinks and I like it, but he's got so much stuff. Like, I haven't heard it all. Like the one that we're going to play, I hadn't heard that album that's from. That was a new one for me. Like, you know, when I never heard that particular album before, that's really cool to hear. But obviously, I've heard plenty of his other material, and I love the Barrett Style Beauty stuff that he does with Pefkin and stuff, and they're working as well. And I put them on once. I remember putting them on the depot. It must have started this year actually, before things were all nuts. And I remember that was honestly like a spellbinding performance for the pair of them together. Like, they're both incredible musicians, but just like Pefkin and Kitchen Sinks together, that was like so good. And like, my mind your mind goes to this amazing place watching them perform together.
I completely agree, and again, the music that Gail does as Pefkin is just basically, I mean, it's just foundational stuff. You've got to listen to it. I mean, it's just too good. If you're interested in kind of negotiating with music as landscape and as creative, spiritual, weird experience, you've got to listen to some Pefkin albums. It's that simple. You know. And
you're spot on with the family thing, because that's the whole thing. I love when you play music with people, when you like have that connection, and like, you know, you admire them a lot musically, but you also, like, you know, your friends, or you become friends through the music. Because, you know, I love that so much, and I feel, you know, it's a very sort of weird, happy, like, lovely, almost, you know, erratic in ways as well. But just, you know, family, and it's nice when, you know, because there's no room for arseholery in this at all. And you took a deal with music. We've all got to support and look out for each other. And even if, you know, if you love something, go and support it, and make sure, you know, even just simple like, oh, that was great, or even like, if, you know, if something's not your thing, you know, you can still support it by like being glad they're out there to do that. And it's just, it's important to kind of keep that, and just, as you're saying, and I couldn't agree more with, like, you know, just the whole being a good person and stuff with the music scene. It's nice to remember that we're all part of one big, I guess, to use some of your terms, you said, we're like all part of one great big spirit and beyond, aren't we? Just creating, like, in different fringes, creating
Couldn't have put it better, Stu.
So we're in since March in the UK, but it's been a thing for like over a year now, because it's January. So we're now in the depressing COVID times, and that's obviously been challenging and difficult for everybody involved and everything. So, and honestly, like I'd say, I'm so thankful to have music and to be still creating and stuff, because it's unbelievable we're still in this mess. But music is that, like, I think music, or just a passion of some sort, is important for keeping people saying stuff as well. So before we talk about what you've actually gone on to do in the COVID times, so how did you find that affected you as a musician? Like, because obviously we can't play gigs anymore and experience stuff together and stuff, so it limits a lot more of what you can do. But did you find, like, it made you focus more on other avenues, or did it make you go, let's take a step back and just look at what I was doing, or did it make you think, like, or did you go, I can't, you know, like, how did you react almost to it? Like,
it was pretty severe and fierce, obviously, when it hit for everyone in the music community. And like many people, you know, I had just released an album, and I'd got like a whole summer of gigs, you know, kind of tentatively already lined up. But, you know, I think it's been incredibly challenging. But once I got over the shock of what was happening, my next thought was like, okay, right, what can be done? You know, what can be created in this time if I'm not going to be able to do gigs? And the answer to that for me was, like, on one hand, go away and make more artwork, and on the other hand, it was also like, right, is there something different and new that I can try that's not about going and playing gigs, but something that I've wanted to kind of explore, connect with music for a while? And I think that's probably where the kind of new Chanting Temples project was kind of born in my mind, because, you know, I felt like maybe a way of really using this kind of really awful moment is to kind of put it to some experimental use. I'd seen some messages kind of floating around the universe from someone who played gong and was interested in working with musicians, and that's how I met Alex. And asked her if she'd be interested in coming along to a rehearsal with her beautiful gong instruments. And as soon as we kind of got together, it became pretty clear to me that it was like a really, really exciting way of creating music. For me, it was about putting the acoustic guitar down and just kind of completely opening up the voice and working with a musician that just had her own very powerful approach to kind of playing the gong. Alex in Chanting Temples also does lots of kind of sound therapy, sound journey works with the gong. So it was really a great kind of place to start from. Like, I was really interested in whether I could kind of write lyrics, write songs that were just working against the gong and the kind of singing bowls and things that she used. Now, I had no idea if it would work or not, but it seemed to me like out of the disaster of what was happening that year, I just wanted to find a place of energy. I just wanted to find a place of creativity, because I could see that nothing else was going to happen unless I took some kind of risks in doing something new. And I'm extremely grateful to Alex for basically putting up with me.
I remember you told me about the whole Chanting Temples thing. I remember just like the minute I heard what it was, I was just like, I've not heard this, but I'm sold already. Just Burnt Paw, gongs and all this magical, mystical, planetary stuff. Like, sign me up for this now. I really want to just hear this. And I remember when I heard the first couple of songs, I was like, this is brilliant. And then when I heard the full thing, I'm like, I will love this so much. And again, hats off to Terry, did a great job of capturing that as well. Like, it sounds really like they recorded it. It's really well recorded. It's the same place. Like, there's things in common with what you were doing before, vocally in some places, but it's much more chanty and like, I don't know, almost spiritual. And I hadn't really thought of it before, but I remember listening to it when I was up in Aberdeen, last month, briefly for Christmas and stuff. And I remember having that on, and I remember, like, was it my stepdad or my mum or one of them? I think it was my stepdad compared it to so it was like almost like monks chanting. One of them said it was almost like monks chanting or something. Like, it wasn't their thing, but I really liked that comment, because they were kind of confused, but they were also just like, to this, and I'm like, it kind of does. I hadn't thought that. I was like, it's glorious. I love it. But like, see someone comparing it to something like that, I'm like, that's actually quite spot on. I thought it wasn't their bag. I was like, oh, that's quite cool. Because it's very chanty, and it does have that sort of that vibe, but like, not an organized religion, obviously, vibe of that, but you know what I mean. But it's sort of just like a group of people kind of like walking along and chanting and holding things and stuff like that. And it makes me just want to I want to just be in a room and hear that, and like, one day that will happen.
You will hear it at some point. But we very much created the album as a magical practice. There was very explicitly supposed to be a sense in which the music was kind of hoping to connect with certain trance states, and all of the images that are kind of used in it, and the kind of the extended vocals and the space around the vocals and the gong are, it's probably not going to be for everyone. But on the other hand, for those that it does kind of reach, it's like I will kind of hope that it's kind of like an immersion into another place. Like, it's some kind of journey through like some underworld, or through some set of experiences that it's perhaps helping you to process on an unconscious level as much as a conscious level. So this is all a very elaborate way of saying it's pretty weird, mystic gong folk music.
It seems to be received pretty well from what I've gathered, and you're going to have a cassette. I saw there's going to be a purple cassette for it soon as well.
Yeah, it's probably, I definitely want to mention that very soon it's going to be released on a label called Sensory Leakage, which I think is based down in London. And the guy who runs that small label kind of just got in touch and said how much he'd been enjoying it, which was just really, really, really kind. It wasn't someone that I'd known before, and it had kind of really connected with him. So it's been a really great creative process to turn that album into this really lovely physical psychedelic tape version. So yeah, that's been, it's been a great outcome for us for that.
We'll definitely give that like a shout and stuff when that does come out. I'll see it anyway, but I'm sure if I don't, I'm sure it'll find its way along the
It will.
mystical atmosphere, and I will definitely be obtaining one of those. Psychedelic Purple. I saw that. I was like, this is so perfect for that. It's like when there was that video for one of the songs. The Summoning had the video, wasn't it?
The video was made by a Glasgow-based artist, photographer, filmmaker, collage maker called Lego Morphosis. They're incredibly beautiful work that they make, and they did a film for the track called Symbols. Their art is very much worth having a look at. They're on Instagram, and some of their stuff is on Facebook and their own kind of website as well, which has just beautiful artwork. So yeah.
Well, it's well, I think that's a good sort of round trip through the Paw discovery. Paw discography. Well, discovery of discography. You know, that's it, exactly. So yeah, and I guess like if I want to see. Well, hear more Paw and stuff. Obviously, it's Burnt Paw on Bandcamp, and the Chanting Temples stuff is on there as well. I know there's various YouTube videos and stuff of you as well. Like, and I know there's one from you and Leaf, which was kind of cool. And then I guess for the last segment, we'll play that Kitchen Sink song with Game Grey Milk and the singing, and we'll play "The Serpent Awakes" by Chanting Temples, and then we'll close up. But thanks very much, Andy, for being on this and everything, and letting me experiment with this. So we'll see how this goes when it's all together. But thank you for being a part of it. It was a very lovely chat, and I'm really glad that that I've done this. And let's see, and that you've been here. And
well, thank you, Stu, for all the work that you do for the alternative music community in Edinburgh. You know, it's an amazing job that you're doing. So you know, we all really appreciate that, genuinely.
I just create lovely people like yourselves who make amazing music. I just try my best to try and bring good stuff together, or stuff I want to go to or hear. In the case of now, when it has to be streams. And so basically, folk like yourself who are very talented, very lovely musicians and stuff, and just good people, both the music and just as a human, make this all worthwhile. And yeah, I just want to kind of. What I do is not possible without all the lovely musicians. So let's make that clear. It's a big community, and we're all this together. And
remember the album, Stu.
So on that note, so this is Fuzz Bat Gigs Podcast, episode 1. Thanks again to the lovely Burnt Paw, and I guess that's this done. I'll play the last 2 songs, and then I'll end.
First night we heard the singing, the cows they all laid down, and the sky seemed somehow darker than before. The old men caught each other's eyes, but they never said a word. The young ones came back slowly from the shore. Singing on the second night, it made no sense to me. But all the others seemed to somehow know. The old woman nodded slowly, and the young ones brushed their hair. Smirking in the fire's disturbing glow. The third night, the wee children started crawling to the cliff. And only Job and I would pull them back. The others just stared silently, as if they had no cares. They stayed like that until the dawn did crack.
Long have you traveled, valley and mountain, inside the circle. Breathe and lie down. There is no past and there is no let the waves carry our bones to the bottom. The towers are falling, crowns that mean nothing. Let the storm enter. No wind will harm you. Horses of wisdom, ravens of all that you need is buried inside you. In the forests of darkness, the serpent awakes.
Thanks everyone who tuned into that there and had a wee listen. Once again, that was Fuzz Bat Gigs Podcast episode number 1, and we're with our lovely guest Burnt Paw. Yeah, so that's this one done. Everyone, please look after yourselves. Please stay safe and wash your hands. And the next episode, the special guest will be Paul Vickers in the Leg. So very much looking forward to that. Keep an eye out for that one. And yeah, cheers for now then. Bye bye.